So good afternoon. This is the Transportation Task Force of the Capital Long Range Improvements Committee. Before we begin, we're noting the meeting includes remote participation of members authorized under Minnesota statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. And the task force chair will now call this meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll so we can verify presence of a quorum. John?
All right, so calling the meeting to order. Staff, could you call the roll?
Okay, let's see. Thorbjorn Adam. Thorbjorn Adam. John Bernstein.
Here.
Steve Brandt.
Here.
Sonia DeGarmo.
Here.
Scott Engel.
Here.
Tony Foster.
Here.
You know,
Risa Husted.
every
Risa Husted. Katie Jones.
Here.
Matt Kazinka.
here.
Dan Miller.
Here.
George Montague.
Here.
Todd Schumann.
Here.
Jeff Strand.
Here.
We got 10 members present.
Can I interrupt? Thorbjorn, Adam, and I, this is Erica Monitor, we switched. So he looks like we got put in the right breakout rooms, but my name should be on the roll call and I am here.
Oh, gotcha.
Thank you, Erica. Neil, could you take down the presentation slide so we can just see each other? I think that's going to be most effective for this part of the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, so lots of new members. I'm going to try to balance getting this done accurately and with everyone feeling like they got to say their piece on anything they want to say their piece on, with also being efficient so we can all get on with the rest of our day. So our task over the next however long it takes us is going to be to go through the projects that we heard about today, which I believe is every transportation project. I don't think anything was left out of transportation, which is not typically how this happens. It's just how it broke out this year. Typically, we end up doing roughly half of them, which is why we got a lot of work. We're going to go through each project and put it into a category under project priority. And I'm going to read you those in a minute. And we're also going to do the same for contribution to city goals. We'll do each project for those two areas. And just as a refresher for people, going back a few years ago, once we did these categorizations, individual ratings were required to stay within those categories. That is no longer the case. It's strongly recommended, but you do have the ability to go outside of those areas as an individual when you're rating, if you choose to. There's been concern in the past sometimes that a lot of these categories, or excuse me, a lot of these projects have similar ratings across the board. I would not be concerned with that necessarily. Even if that's the case, there's still a fairly large point range within each of those categories, upwards of 40 points that, 10 points can make the difference on depending on where it falls, a project getting funded or not getting funded. So I think it's more important to stick to the definitions and not, if that's however it breaks out, that's how we should go about doing this. So with that, I'm going to, just for the sake of everybody who's new, hopefully everyone's had a chance to review the capital guidelines. I'm going to just briefly read you the definitions of project priorities. So there's 4 of those. The first is critical. That's describe the capital proposal as indispensable and demanding attention due to an immediate need of public endangerment if not corrected. Few projects can qualify for this high of a classification. Failure to fund a critical project generally would result in suspension of a municipal service to minimize risk to the public. That's critical. Significant is next. Describe the capital proposal deemed to have a high priority in addressing a need or service as previously indicated by policymakers and/or submitting agency priority ranking. This designation may also pertain to a proposal that is an integral and/or inseparable part of achieving completeness of a larger improvement or series of improvements. Next is important. Describes a capital proposal addressing a pressing need that can be evaluated as a standalone project. Proposals may be considered important if they are required to maintain an expected standard of service, achieve equity in service delivery, or increase efficiency in providing public services. Failure to fund an important proposal would mean some level of service is still possible. And finally, desirable describes a capital proposal that would provide increased public benefits, enhancement of municipal services, or other upgrading of public infrastructure. Failure to fund a desirable project would not immediately impair current municipal services. And then we're also going to do contribution to city goals. That's just strong, moderate, and little or no contribution. There's no specific definitions beyond that for those areas. So before we jump into this, are there any questions about those definitions that we need to clarify for anybody? Okay, so for process, if you want to follow along, it's certainly not necessary, but if you want to follow along, I'm using the rating sheet that was distributed this morning via email, and I'm on the transportation tab, which I think is the third tab in, and I'm going to go through these projects from left to right, starting with that tab. The way I'm going to do this, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to tell you, to the extent that these projects had ratings last year, I'm going to tell you what the ratings were last year. That does not in any way suggest that we have to maintain that. I would say, however, since this committee, this task force, I'd like to think is thoughtful. If it is what we did last year, there probably should be new information or a good reason why we want to change it. But nonetheless, it's in no way intended to suggest that we need, I'm not trying to ram this through with last year's ratings. I'm simply using it as a reference point. So we're going to kind of use loose Robert's rules on this, and I'll tell you what those ratings were from last year. I'll entertain a motion. Even if you don't agree with that as it is, you may want to just move it, and then we can discuss it and make amendments and make changes. If people can just raise their hand in the queue so that no one's talking over anybody else, I think that would be great. And before I dive in, I see Steve's got a question.
Well, my first question was whether we were going to handle it informally or whether we were going to use the hand raising, and that's been answered. The second question is, I've sometimes found it hard to keep up as we whip through these fairly quickly. Will Robert be keeping a record of what decisions we reach and sending out a new sheet? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to keep a record. And Neil, I don't know if you're doing this as well. If you want to, you certainly can. Otherwise, I'm happy to share with you what I'm doing. You are not, but to answer Steve's question more broadly, this has to go out to the full committee. So, so you don't need to the individual members don't need to keep track of this. You will get a rating sheet that is updated with this information that has X's where we've rated them. So you then know that that's where you're supposed to. That's the range that was recommended by each task force, because they're going to have to combine both what we're doing with what human development is doing as well. So I'm going to start, as Steve alluded to, I get moving pretty quickly with this, but I'm going to start slow for the benefit of people that are new to the process and just, it's been a year since we've done this. So we'll initially start taking these projects one by one. As we start to get into them, especially when we get to paving and they're projects that have similar ratings, I'm going to start to group them together. I'm doing that solely for the sake of efficiency. If I group 5 projects together and there's one in there that you've got a different opinion about and you don't want it to get so-called rammed through, you can make a motion to just have it separated out, and then we can do the other 4 that are not controversial, so that we, again, balance efficiency with everyone getting to say whatever it is they want to say and that nothing gets rammed through. So with that, are there any, Steve's got his, no, sorry, let me see if I can raise his hand. Are there any other questions before we get started? Okay, so again, on the transportation tab, we're going to start with bike 28. Last year, that was rated significant and strong. So I have a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so for bike 28, this is the Protected Bikeways program. I'm going to go slow at first here as promised. So last year that was rated significant under project priority and strong contribution to city goals. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make about that set of ratings? Hearing none, let's see, Neil and Jeff, I'm hoping we can do this by, especially on something like this, where there's not any comments. Is there a way we can do this? I don't want to have to do roll call on 85 projects. We're never going to get through this. Is there a way to do this by unanimous consent? Go ahead, Jeff.
I would suggest that it be done by unanimous consent and then have a roll call at the end.
Okay, so that means if we
Very end, very end, you have a roll call.
Yeah, the only problem with that is they probably won't all be non-controversial, right? So maybe we just deal with the ones that are not unanimous as they come up. All right, so I'll just keep track of these. So is there any language I should be using with this, Jeff? Or do we just vote at the end?
Neil is silent, but I'm
I'm
just saying without objection and with unanimous consent. It is agreed to, something like that.
All right, so without objection and unanimous consent, that one's agreed to, and we'll vote on that at the end. That's bike 28. Moving to, sorry guys, this is just, virtual is different, and want to make sure that we're doing this up on the up and up. All right, BP001, this is safe routes to schools. Again, rated significant and strong. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved.
I'll consider the second move a second.
Second.
Is there any discussion on significant and strong safe routes to schools, BP001?
No, I just note that and I'm glad you mentioned that in the other room, John, because
Just a minute, please. Let's raise hands, and I'm going to recognize Sonia, and then Dan, and then George.
Yes, hi. I'm trying to find the email with the link that you referenced.
So it was sent out this morning by staff. I think it came, I'm not sure, I think it may have come from Justin. Let me look quick.
Yeah, it came from Justin at 8:04.
Okay, thank you.
Dan, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just a question, and just to make sure that I'm not seeing something funny, but this year BP001 Safe Routes to School is listed in the in the consecutive previous new funding requirements at 25, rated 25, and last year was 35, and I think that might be just a renewal, but I just wanted to point it out just in case there was an error there.
Yeah, so I'll address that briefly. I haven't looked at that specifically, but just so everybody knows, we changed that area of the ratings. So there may be some things that look different from last year. In previous years, it was where in the funding it was. So if a project got introduced for the very first time last year, and it was being asked for in the nearest term year, so for this year, 2022, it would get the highest number of points. And the problem with that was that doesn't encourage good long-term budgeting, right? The departments can ask for projects in 2021 that they want funded in the following year, and they get a bunch of points for that. So we changed the way that works to now it gets more and more points for the number of consecutive years it's been asked for. So a project that's been in and asked for 6 consecutive years gets the full number of points. And again, it's asked for, not necessarily in previous past budgets, because it's not the requesting department's fault if the project is not funded by the city council. So don't compare last year on that to this year, because the rating classification changed. But having said that, it's probably worth keeping an eye to make sure that by the current definitions, it's accurate. So if a project falls out for a year, it would lose points. You count from the new year when it's in, if that makes sense. Going to George now.
I was just going to follow up and thank you for the point you raised in a general session, because I took issue with it struck me as odd that the department ranked this project as number 4 out of 62, yet only gave it an important level of need. So I'm glad that we're ascribing a higher level of need to it. And I think that's consistent with their rating,
Yeah, and
or their ranking, I should say.
anecdotally, I would say I honestly I don't. I'm sure there's differing opinions about this, but the department's ranking is just one input you should use, and I honestly don't pay all that much attention to it, with the exception of maybe a few projects where I'm curious. We're all pretty capable of figuring out how important it is to the city based on all the framework that we have. All right.
Thanks.
Are there any other comments specifically on BP 001? I'll just remind everybody we've got a motion on the floor to rate this significant and strong. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, that said, I asked this of Justin and Jeff, and I'll just bring it up here, is that I think it would be helpful to still have a simple spreadsheet of the project detail headings that each project gives. I mean, there's a rating of where level of importance and everything else. It may differ from what we do here, but I think that being able to see that in a simplified spreadsheet like we've done on other projects, when you get down to trying to rate things fairly across the board, I think that might be helpful. Thank you.
Anything else on BP 001? All right. This is another one that's going to pass by unanimous consent. I'll mark these and we'll vote on them all at the end. All right, I'm going to start to speed up a little bit now. So let's take BP 004, BP 006, and BP 007. That's pedestrian safety, the 18th Avenue Trail Gap, and the North Side Greenway. Those were all rated significant and strong last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion for those 3 projects, BP 4, 6, and 7 at significant and strong? All right, seeing none, we'll move those by unanimous consent as well. All right, now we're getting to a new project, so there's no frame of reference for this one. So this is BP 008, Public Space Program. So I'll entertain a motion from anybody who's got a view on this one.
I would move important and moderate.
Is there a second to important and moderate?
Second.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor for important and moderate for BP 008. Is there any discussion on that one? None?
Yeah, I think to call this a moderate doesn't reflect the how it's meeting city goals. I think this, I agree maybe on the first one, but the second one, I think it's definitely meeting city goals of moving people out of their automobiles.
Frankly, I couldn't figure out what the program was from the description that was presented.
Go ahead, Erica.
Yeah, I think it being a brand new program and they're not asking for funding for 2-3 years out, like I feel like I just don't know enough about it. So important moderate feels good for where it is right now, and I'm totally opening to changing it as we get closer to more detail and actually implementing this stuff.
Any other comments on this one? Scott, since you raised an objection, I want to ask for your approval for unanimous consent. If you don't want to,
I don't care. I think Erica's point makes sense since it's not even funded for the next few years.
Okay, so I'm going to take that as you're okay with unanimous consent for this one. All right. Moving on, that's VZ001. That's the Vision Zero project that was rated significant strong last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'm guessing this one's not going to be controversial, but is there any discussion on this one? All right, we'll move that by unanimous consent as well. All right, moving on to sidewalks. We've got two of them, so I'm going to take them together. That's SWK 001 and SWK 002. So one is defective hazardous sidewalks and two is sidewalk gaps, both rated significant and strong. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on these two? Also not particularly controversial. I'm going to take that as unanimous consent. So now we'll move on to paving. Let's start with PV 001.
Hey,
Sorry.
John,
Go ahead, Amity.
if we want to write a comment on one of these, like, do we need to let you know now, or is that for later?
You don't need to let me know at all, but you're
Sure.
certainly welcome to. I mean,
Okay.
anybody can write a comment on anything.
Cool.
But to the extent that anybody has an opinion and wants to suggest that we ought to write a comment, please feel free to be recognized and make that point now.
Got it.
Start thinking ahead about those things.
So, I mean, with that, I want to write a comment on the sidewalk gaps on 02 about the lack of funding for it, and if it's a priority for the city, how we actually like enforce those priorities through our job here and click and funding. It'll be better written. I have a draft of it. I just need to like, really write it.
Yeah, I'm glad Amity brought that up. I mean, something you should all be thinking about individually as we're going through and making these ratings is projects that you feel a little bit of passion about, or you just have some thoughts about that you feel like there ought to be a comment on. Start formulating ideas in your head about where you want to write comments. We're going to get to that in early May as a task force. To the extent possible, I'll ask people to draft comments in advance of our meetings. That's not always possible. And you may discover that there's other committee task force members that share your passion, and you may want to jointly author a comment. Or you may find there's somebody that's got a slightly different opinion, and you can find a way to resolve those differences and come up with a comment that meets everybody's needs. All right, so moving forward on PV 001, this is Parkway paving. That was rated significant and strong. I'm sorry, I need to go back for a second. I think I misstated on SWK 001 and 002. Those are actually critical strong, not significant strong. That's what they were last year. So I'm going to just reopen that. Is there any issues or comments on that? All right, I'm going to take critical strong as unanimous consent on those two projects.
Yeah, I was just going to say, given the comment that Amity said she wants to write, and Scott brought this up during presentations, like now that you say that, that makes a lot of sense. So yes, I'm critical.
Okay, so moving to paving, the Parkway paving project, that's rated significant and strong. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Dan Miller.
Second, Jeff Strand.
Any comments on significant and strong for the Parkway paving program?
I'll be making some kind of a comment on this, reflecting on what I tried to bring up during the meeting.
Okay. Anything else on this one? Okay, I'll take that as unanimous consent on that one. Let's take PV 006 on its own. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pair the two alley projects together. So that's 6 and 63 because they have similar ratings. That's so PV 006 is the alley renovation project, and PV 63 is the unpaved alley project. And they're both rated important and moderate. Do I have a motion on that?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on that one? The only thing I'd raise on this is just out of interest. You know, I asked the question about why there was no funding in the near-term years, and they raised how important this is to the city, which is, it's interesting. My understanding anecdotally on this is you get different views from different citizens around the city about this. Some citizens don't want the assessments that come with having an unpaved alley paved because some of these unpaved alleys are not the dusty dirt alleys you might imagine them to be. They've been oiled over many, many years and almost work like pavement. The city is more interested in it because it's easier for garbage trucks and snow plows and that kind of thing. Just an interesting factoid about it. It's not as universally welcomed as you might imagine. Any other comments on 66 and 63 at important and moderate, excuse me? I'll take that as unanimous consent. And we'll next go to PV 56 and PV 59 together. They're somewhat similar programs. The Asphalt Pavement Resurfacing Program and the Major Pavement Maintenance Program. Those are both rated significant and strong. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Any discussion on PV 56 and 59 at significant and strong? I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving along. That takes us to PV 74. So this is the cooperative projects with the county and the state. Rated significant and strong. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on PV 74, the county and state cooperative projects? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent on PV 74. PV 75, we're skipping. I know we have a lot of new members. Does anybody want a little bit of clarification on why this is there and why we're not rating it? Or is everybody good?
Good riddance.
All right, hearing none.
You know,
I'd
I'm
like
sorry.
to a little bit.
Could you give like the 3 sec? I think I got it, but just the 3 sentence sort of of why there are several categories like this we don't
Sure.
budget for.
So this one is different than all of the others that we don't do ratings on. All of the other ones are what are called reimbursable projects, and they're basically internal accounting by the city. So an example would be they're going to do a street project, and as a result, the water department's going to come in and redo the water mains. The way the city does the accounting on that, the city assigns part of the cost of digging up the streets to the water department instead of putting it all in paving, because water is benefiting from it as well. So it's nothing for us to rate. It's just how they're internally moving money around. So you'll see those projects all end with an R, and they show up in here because they need to do CBRs on it to do the internal accounting, but it's nothing that we need to rate. We're already implicitly rating these projects somewhere else. PV 75 is a little bit different. This is a project that we used to see, and every single year it got the lowest ratings of any project. Basically, the idea behind the project was it was a fund that the city had ready to go of dollars that were not allocated to anything specific, so that if the city needed to move quickly to acquire land for some kind of economic development as a result of market forces, you know, whether it's the Twin Stadium or the Viking Stadium or whatever, they'd have ready available funds to do that with. The implicit problem with that Click pointed out to them every year is they were basically asking for a fund with no project. So they're asking us to approve $2 million that has no project to it, has no details. It's not getting the same sort of scrutiny that every other project gets. And then what happens is the following year it comes back with something they've used the money for as if we've already approved it, when in fact we're seeing it for the first time. So the city is still using this project and this category to do things, but we specifically a couple of years ago in a meeting with the mayor asked that they take this out of the Click process because it had this problem with they get to choose the details of the project, and it implicitly looked like Click was giving them approval when in fact we weren't, because we didn't know at the time that they're asking for the money how they were going to use the money. So we specifically don't rate it for that reason.
Thank you for that explanation.
Sure. All right, so moving on, PV 92, Technology Drive and 37th Avenue Northeast, rated important and moderate last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on this one? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving on to PV 104. This is the ADA ramp replacement program, rated critical and strong last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on this one? PV 104 at critical and strong. Hearing none. Take that as unanimous consent. Right. Speeding up again a little bit, we're going to take PV 108, PV 113, and PV 122, all rated significant and strong last year. That's the concrete street rehab, 29th Street West Phase 2, and Dowling Avenue. Do I have a motion that's significant and strong?
Move.
Second.
John, if you're saying something, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I know. There was feedback online. I was just asking for people to mute if they're not talking because somebody's got a bunch of... Dan, I think it might be your mic. Can you mute when you're not talking? There we go. Thank you. All right. So just to reiterate, we've got a motion on the floor for significant and strong for PV 108, 113, and 122. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. Again, take that as unanimous consent. Continuing to move forward. All right, we've got a lot to get through, so I'm going to start to really move it along. If somebody wants to break one of these out because they have an opinion about it, please do so. I'm going to take PV 123, PV 126, 127, 131, 132, 137, and 138. All significant and strong last year. Is there a motion?
Second.
Just give everybody a minute to look those over in case there's something somebody wants to break out or anything else. Are there any comments on this?
Can you say what they are?
You mean the actual names of them?
Yeah, I can't
Yeah,
remember
sure.
what you just said, and I.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. 123 is Logan Park Industrial. 126 is Bryant Avenue South. 127 is 37th Avenue Northeast. 131 is the Residential Neighborhood Reconstruction Projects. 132 is First Avenue South. 137 is 29th Ave Northeast. And 138 is 26th Street East. Okay, hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent on those 7 projects.
So John, is everybody on the video?
I think so.
Can you see everybody?
Well, everybody, I'm hemming and hawing because it's Microsoft Teams, right? I think a few people are not on video. I see a couple of initials down below.
Okay. I was thinking if we did like a thumbs up or something on screen, maybe that could help us move forward, but maybe that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think for purposes of open meeting law, we have to probably do an actual roll call vote.
Yeah, I think that's right.
But we're just going with unanimous consent, but that would.
Right.
Wrap it up at the end.
Yeah.
Vote on it at the end.
Right. All right, moving on to PV 140. This is 13th Avenue Northeast, rated significant strong last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on PV 140 at significant and strong? Hearing none, I'll take unanimous consent on that. PV 141, this is Grand Avenue from Lake to 48th. This one was rated important and strong last year. Do I have a motion on this one?
I make a motion to rate it strong and what, significant? Yeah. It's going under construction this year.
So there's a motion on the floor to rate this significant strong. Is there a second?
Second.
So any discussion on this? This was rated important strong last year. The motion on the floor is for significant strong.
John, I'll speak up on this because I think I was one of the people who might have been behind last year's rating. It was an issue of whether this project or Bryant should go first. This one is clearly in the queue ahead of Bryant, and I think we should rate it equivalent as we are doing with the motion.
So just to be clear, that was a comment in favor of the motion, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Any other comments on this one? I will take that as unanimous consent on PV 141. Moving to PV 142, that's down east paving, and 143, that's north industrial.
Sorry, John, can you clarify that last one? Did we end with significant and strong or important and strong?
Significant and strong.
Chair, would you mind separating these two? Because
Right, I will.
thank you.
So PV 142 will take, that's down east paving. That was rated significant and moderate last year. Is there a motion?
Move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion on significant and moderate for down east paving, PV
Well,
142?
just a question, if I'm remembering this, oh, sorry.
Go ahead, George, you're the only one in queue.
Okay. Yeah, if I'm remembering this, is this the one where they showed the video images of the, like where the brick is actually exposed downtown east?
Yes.
It's under such disrepair that it, looked pretty bad shape. And so I'm wondering why this would be a lower rating, the moderate versus strong.
My
I'm sorry?
my argument would be that these are both low traffic areas, relatively speaking. They're industrial areas primarily. And in many cases, that brick paving has been much more durable than asphaltic surfaces.
Okay.
I'd also point out the distinction between project priority versus contribution to city goals. It's possible that a project could have a very high priority in terms of the level of service that it provides, and for whatever reason, not be something that meets a lot of the city goals.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good. No, I don't disagree with the ratings. I was just trying to understand it. So.
Any other comments on 142 at significant and moderate? I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving to 143, this is North Industrial, rated significant and strong last year. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Is there a second? Got it. Any discussion on significant and strong for PV 143 North Industrial?
John, I would argue that the same factors that apply to downtown east should be applied to North Industrial. I would argue for significant and moderate simply because it's doesn't get a huge amount of traffic compared to other streets in the city.
You want to move that as an amendment?
Sure, I'll try that. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to take a vote on this. The amendment is to move PV 143 as significant and moderate. Neil, can you take the roll on that?
So it's for significant and moderate. That's the roll call
for PV 143.
Okay. So John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt.
Aye.
Johnny DeGarmo.
Aye.
Engel.
Aye.
Lee Foster.
Aye.
Risa Hustad. Katie Jones.
Abstain.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Claire. George Montague.
Aye.
This is Dan Miller. If you called me, I didn't hear you. Aye.
Todd Schumann. Chair Jeff String.
Nay.
So that's 8 ayes and 1 nay and 1 abstention.
All right, so the motion passes. Moving on to PV 150, that's First Avenue North, That was rated important and moderate last year. Do I have a motion? Is there a second?
Second.
Can I just add, just stop for a second? Can I ask people, if you're not talking, if you could mute yourself, because some people's mics are taking it over and I'm not hearing the motions in the seconds, so it'd be appreciated if you could mute yourself when you're not speaking.
Sorry.
All right, so there's a motion on the floor for for important and moderate for PV 150. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving to PV 154, that's Franklin Avenue West, and PV 157, that's 33rd Avenue Northeast. Last year those were rated significant and strong. Is there a motion?
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on PV 154 and 157 at significant and strong? I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving along. Let's take PV, I'm going to take three now. PV 158, 160, and 161. 158 is Hennepin Avenue. 160 is First Avenue South. 161 is 3rd Street South. Those were rated significant and strong last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion on significant and strong for 158, 160, and 161? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. 163, that's 31st Street East from Blaisdell to Bloomington, rated important and strong last year. Is there a motion?
I make a motion to make it significant and strong.
Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Any discussion on significant and strong for 163, 31st Street East?
Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Just want to speak in favor, like that includes underneath 35W where that's being reconstructed with the Lake Street transit station. So that in favor of significant strong.
Anybody else? Okay, hearing nothing else, I'll take that as unanimous consent for significant and strong for 163. All right, 165 through 167. 165 is 35th Street. 166 is 2nd Street Northeast, and 167 is Dowling Avenue North from Thomas to Lyndale. All rated significant strong last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Any
Second.
discussion on significant and strong for those three? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. Let's take 169 and 170. 169 is 38th Street from Lyndale to Park. 170 is 11th Avenue South from 8th Street to 24th Street. Slightly different ratings. 169, 38th Street is important and strong. 170, 11th Avenue South is important and moderate. Is there a motion?
I would move significant and strong for 38th and for 11th. I think these both have important functions in their parts of the city.
Second.
So the motion on the floor is for significant and strong for 169 and 170. Again, 169 is 38th Street, 170 is 11th Avenue South. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent for significant and strong on 169 and 170. All right, let's do 172 through 175. 172 is Chicago Avenue, 174 is 36th Street, and 175 is 38th Street. All rated significant strong last year.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on significant and strong for 172 Chicago Avenue, 174 36th Street, and 175 38th Street? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. Now we're into some new ones. We've got no frame of reference from last year, so we'll do these one at a time. 177 is 38th Street East and Chicago Avenue. I'll entertain a motion.
I'm motion significant and strong.
Second.
Did I hear a second? Was that you, Jeff? Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for significant and strong for 177 38th Street East and Chicago Avenue. Is there any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent for significant and strong. That moves us to PV 178. That's Johnson Street Northeast at I-35W. Do I have a motion?
I'll move significant strong. Dan Miller.
Second.
Okay, the motion on the floor is significant and strong for Johnson Street Northeast at I-35W. Is there any discussion? Dan Miller,
Yes.
can you mute, please? There's a lot of feedback through from your mic. I'm not sure why. Okay, so again, significant strong, hearing no further discussion. I'll take that as unanimous consent. And the final paving project. This is PV 179, 7th Street North. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move significant strong.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor is significant and strong for 7th Street North, PV 179. Is there any discussion on that one? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent on that one. So we're skipping over this next one is one of those reimbursable projects I described, so there's nothing to wait there. That moves us to bridges. I'll take the first two together. That's BR 101, which is the Major Bridge Repair and Rehabilitation Program, and BR 127, which is the Nicollet Avenue Bridge over Minnehaha Creek. Both rated significant and strong last year. Is there a motion?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second.
Any discussion on significant and strong for those two projects? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. BR 133, this is the Cedar Lake Road Bridge over the railroad. That was rated important and moderate last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
I got a second. Any discussion on that one? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. BR 134, this is the Bridge 9 program, rated significant and strong last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on significant and strong for Bridge 9, BR 134? I'll take that as unanimous consent. Now we're to a new bridge project, BR 135. This is Pillsbury Avenue South. Is there a motion?
Move. Sorry, I keep getting muted. Important, and I'm sorry. I have to keep switching back and forth here between the screen to unmute and the spreadsheet, but I would move important and moderate.
I'll second it.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is important and moderate for Pillsbury Avenue Bridge, BR 135. Is there any discussion on important and moderate? Scott, go ahead.
I'm just going to say, I tried my best to read all these before today, but it was physically impossible. So I don't even know anything about this project. So I guess I don't know. Several of these, I haven't gone through the CBRs yet. And I kind of feel like we were expected to know too much within 5 days. So
Jeff, go ahead, then Amity.
Thank you. I support the motion. As a Northside resident who takes a citywide view, you know, there are what, 40 plus bridges along this corridor, mostly historic, but I think if we look at our definitional question and fully supporting the infrastructure over time, longtime members may remember, what was it, Fremont Avenue? We had a bridge decommissioning, and then we had a change, and then we had a new bridge. So and I agree with Scott's contention about the timing, and it's something we should definitely footnote for next year to create more time to look at these thoughtfully. But bottom line is each individual can, at their discretion, look at these rankings after you have fully vetted the proposal, the CBR.
And Amity, before you go, let me just jump in and address Scott's concern, because I think it's a fair one. First of all, the problem that Scott is highlighting, it's a huge problem, right? There's just no way you can go digest this amount of material in that amount of time. At the same time, you know, like I mentioned earlier, we just need to give a lot of grace to a lot of people involved, right? It's a confluence of events that made this occur, right? More than it was anybody dropping the ball that shouldn't have dropped the ball. The entire staff knew, with the exception of one, and the one returning person was on a leave during the critical time when we were getting set up to launch for this year. Having said that, we are going, I believe I'm correct, that we are going through every single transportation project today, which means we're not going to have a need to meet at the end of our meeting next Friday. So here's what I would propose to the group. Number one, I would say, to Scott's concern that he's being asked to vote on something and he's got no clue what the details of it are. I personally have a lot of faith in us as a group. I think we are a very diverse group that brings a lot of different experiences to this, and we're all intelligent and thoughtful, and I generally trust the group as a whole. But having said that, I think what we could do next week in a fairly shortened period of time is, if, you know, over the course of this week, you get through a project that you haven't seen so far that we vote on today, I'm willing to entertain discussing changing the ratings that we're going through today on a, you know, let's not be abusive of it. If there's a handful of projects where you go and you look at it and you're like, you know what, I really disagree with this, I'd like to bring it up and at least discuss it, we can use our half an hour next week to do that. And then people don't feel like this is getting railroaded through. Does that sound reasonable to everybody? Okay, great.
Can I also make one other note?
Sure.
It appears that this one, I don't believe we have a CBR for it even. So I would want to see that, I think, before making a judgment, because all it was a mention in the presentation.
That's what I was going to ask in my question. I don't see the CBR in the link to all of the CBRs.
You're correct. All right, I'm going to suggest that somebody amend this motion to table until we have a CBR to look at. There's no, I mean, the idea of voting on something where you haven't seen a CBR, it doesn't make any sense.
So moved. Or do I have to actually say, I make a motion on tabling this CBR till we have the CBR?
Okay. Neil, can you take a vote on that one? We're going to table making a decision on 135 until next week.
All right. John Bernstein.
Aye.
Steve Brandt. Steve Brandt.
Aye.
Sonia DeGarmo. Sonia DeGarmo. Scott Engel.
Aye.
Amity Foster.
Aye.
Lisa Hustad. Katie Jones. Matt Kazinka.
Aye.
Erica Mauter.
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Oh, there you go. Jeff Strand.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes.
All right. So that one is tabled till next week. Jeff, let's make a mental note to talk to Robert about making sure that CBR gets posted so we can address that one. That takes us to traffic. I'm going to attempt to speed us up here, but please, if you want to break one out, you can make that motion. I'm going to take all of the traffic projects, and I'll read through them. So that's TR008, which is Parkway Street Light Replacement, TR10, which is Traffic Management Systems, TR11, which is City Street Light Renovation, TR21, which is Traffic Signals, TR22, which is Traffic Safety Improvements, TR24, which is Pedestrian Street Lighting Corridors, and TR25, which is Sign Replacement Program. Those were all rated significant strong last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Amity, you've got your hand up. Sorry, did I miss you or did I just not take it down from before?
I just never took it down.
Got it. I'm on it. All right. Any discussion on the motion to move all of the traffic projects as significant and strong? Hearing none, I will take that as unanimous consent. And that takes us to, again, we've got the traffic reimbursed, the transportation reimbursable, which will skip. That takes us to PK004, off-street systems, rated important and moderate last year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Did I hear a second?
Second.
Okay. And discussion. Scott's got his hand up. Go ahead, Scott.
Yeah, I would rate this desirable and low. I feel like they don't describe the project, or they describe the projects, but they don't describe what resources are available, and they don't seem to have a plan for these facilities over time frame. So like I described in the presentations earlier, I'd like more information before giving this a higher rating.
Scott, I think in response to my question, they did indicate that these are funded out of charges that cover both capital and operating costs to parking ramp users. Couldn't answer the other part of your question, though.
Just to remind everybody to please raise your hand. Go ahead, Jeff.
I will support the motion. I do not support downgrading this further. I think that, like it or not, these are really essential for commerce and industry at present. We've acknowledged that we're moving towards electric vehicles and moving perhaps to a place where everybody either walks or bicycles or somehow gets from place to place without using the evil automobile. And I say that not to be contentious with people, but simply, the pandemic hit, and I know as a person who has worked downtown the past year, there were times when there was no bus service, and so people had to drive. There was no other choice. People who work downtown and live in other areas, I had some employees who rode the bus, but there were places where there was no bus service, I'm told by the people living there, where they'd have to divert, 5-10 miles out of their way to get there. And so maybe in the long term, you can have conversions, but believe me, we can't act as if the change has already happened today. And I know we have to live the goals that we believe in and, futuristic, 5 years, 10 years out, but I support the suggested rating, but I don't support the downgrading. And as long as these are self-supporting capital, we have a huge commercial industrial tax base downtown, and I don't know that all the employers there are going to just automatically move away from having places where their working class people can park.
All right, I'll recognize Erica, then Scott, then Steve. Go ahead, Erica.
So I kind of wonder if like the air conditioning part is more maintenance than capital, but I was compelled somewhat by making sure we're able to stay compliant taking payments and also take new forms of payments. Uh, so I'm gonna stick with important and moderate.
Go ahead, Scott.
I feel like Jeff, and I think you're usually very respectful, but I feel like that was disrespectful to me and misrepresented what I was saying. I have never described automobiles as evil. I've never said we are going to completely move away from automobiles. I never said that people weren't going to work downtown. All I suggest is that Public Works come up with an analysis of whether these facilities are being used, particularly because we're in a COVID situation. And my understanding is that 90% of the ramps are empty right now. So I can see where people might disagree with my suggestion, but I don't want to be represented as some crazy person that thinks cars are going to disappear and everybody's going to have to, God forbid, get on a bus. So.
Steve, go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify which proposed rating is actually before us.
So the motion on the floor is for important and moderate.
Okay.
Is there any further discussion? We're going to do a vote on this one. Go ahead, Jeff. Jeff, did you want to be recognized? Jeff?
I'm sorry, it was difficult to unmute. And I want to say, through the chair to Scott, no intention on my part, and if my statement was insensitive, I would retract any statements, and no, was not intended to be critical. And in thinking, I'll say that I'm sorry that I said what I said.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this one? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to make a comment here. I just generally try to wait till everybody else is done and put myself last in queue. I'm supportive of this motion as it is on the floor at important and moderate. I broadly agree with the message that Jeff, I think, was trying to give, which is that, you know, cars are going to continue to be a part of the built environment for the foreseeable future. And it's in fact not in the city goals to eliminate cars. And I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth. These are my words. You know, clearly how the car is fueled needs to change, but that doesn't mean that there isn't going to be a need for physical space for cars going forward. And while it's certainly true that there's been some significant changes in usage of things as a result of COVID, I think we need to be careful, the city needs to be careful not to, if they do assessments about things right now, we're in an incredibly transitional period of time, right, where it's clear whether we're talking about parking or anything else as a result of COVID. There's some things that are going to result in long-term changes, and there are other things that may revert right back to the way they used to be when this is all over. And some of those things may surprise all of us on both sides. So I think we need to be careful about asking them to do an assessment too early, or at least making long-term decisions based on assessments that might be a little bit early, I guess is the way I would word that. So unless there's any further comments, since this one's a little bit controversial, we'll take a vote on it. Again, to remind everybody, the motion on the floor is important and moderate for off-street PK004. Neil, can you call the roll?
John Bernstein,
Aye.
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
Santi DeGarmo,
Aye.
Neil,
No.
Amity Foster,
Aye.
Risa Husted, Katie Jones, Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Erica Mouter,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Todd Schumann, Todd Schumann.
Aye.
Mayor Jeff Strand.
Aye.
That's 10 ayes and 1 nay.
Right, that motion passes. All right, we're making great progress, everybody. Just an update because we're well over the time that this was scheduled to end, which of course I knew was going to happen, but we're getting close to the end. We've just got water left, so I would anticipate that 10 to 15 minutes at the most, maybe even a lot less than that, depending on whether there's any controversy around some of these. So we're now moving to a different tab on the rating sheet. This is the Utilities Fleet tab. And this will start with Water 12, which is the water distribution improvements, which was rated significant and strong last year. Do I have a motion? Okay, I have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on this one? I'll just say quickly, while I'm fully in support of these ratings, this is a great example of one where they just need to give us much more detail than they've been giving us, and they've really gotten a pass on this, and I'm not sure why we haven't been, and I include myself in this, tougher on them about this. And you know, this citizen that contacted me a few weeks ago and then showed up at the public meeting on Wednesday night really brought this to light. This idea that, you know, this project contemplates all of the improvements that need to be made in the water distribution system across the entire city, and we've never seen an inventory. And as it turns out, they don't even have an inventory. Thankfully they're working on it, but what on earth has been going on previous to them doing this? They have, you know, coming up with $9 million a year when you have no idea what the total needs are. And this example that this particular citizen is given with these dead-end water mains, which he's shared the map with me, you'd be amazed at how many of them there are across the city, and it's quite a bit more than just aesthetics, as some of us pointed out in the meeting today, that he's an incredibly reasonable guy. And anyway, I won't belabor that. That's not a part of this. So I recognize Steve, and then we'll move on.
I want to reinforce what John said, but I also would like to ask John, are we doing fleet or is that on human development side?
Fleet is on the human development side.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll second John's comments also and just say, I was thinking about the water projects today, and you know, you think about it, water is more important than gold for life. And I don't think we're conserving water appropriately. I don't think we're using gray water as some other jurisdictions. I remember on Click us talking about gray water repurposing 10 years ago. I bet it was 10, 15 years ago, Washington State was getting laws in place, you know, and here we're, you know, you don't agree with me. I mean, I think water is more important than gold. And so just the fact that we have this large infrastructure that is taking surface water, and we had a citizen advisory committee on water. I served on it when we did the ultrafiltration membranes, and maybe we were sold a bill of goods and built too much capacity at the time. That's quite possible, but not to belabor the point, but just, you know, I think we have to do a lot with water, and so they shouldn't just get a free ride, so to speak, on the projects. We should be asking the tough questions, and maybe we need to be more innovative even than we have been.
Yeah, and I would just piggyback off of that, and then I put myself in there with everybody else. I think sometimes it's easy to not scrutinize these projects quite to the same level that projects that are funded with net debt bonds are scrutinized. So for those of you that are new and may not know, these are what are called enterprise funds. So the rates that they charge and the revenues they collect, they're able to use to pay debt service. So as long as they can raise rates at, you know, acceptable amounts, they can basically fund anything they want, and they don't get a whole lot of pushback. And while that's certainly something we want to look at, is what the impact is on rates. You know, another question is how much, what's the asset load you're creating, and what's the future maintenance of that asset load going to be? So just, I think we all should probably should treat these enterprise fund projects with a little bit more scrutiny than we have in the past. And to be fair, they have a tendency to not give us any more information than they need to, right? I mean, it's the classic, human behavior when it comes to budgeting, right? You don't want to give anybody anything they can use as a weapon against you when you're asking for money. But, and for those that don't know, there was a period of time when they stopped giving us the pro forma that showed us what the impact on rates was going to be if they got everything they wanted. And I actually had to do a public data request to get that information, and they finally gave in and started giving it to us since we were going to get it that way anyway. Go ahead, Steve. You're muted, Steve.
There we go. There we go. I would just suggest, John, that since you have more experience than anybody other than perhaps Jeff, that you draft a comment that maybe goes beyond last year's comment and is more specific, because I think there's probably a broad consensus around what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. And, I think before I draft that comment, I want to see what kind of written response we get from the water department about the requests I made this morning. All right, let's not belabor this any further. To just refresh everybody, the motion on the floor for Water 12 water distribution improvements is significant and strong. Is there any further discussion? I'll take that as unanimous consent. Moving right along. So just so everybody realizes that Water 18 is a building basically. So that's the water project that's not rated by transportation. Human Development has that one. So that takes us to Water 23, which is treatment infrastructure improvements. That's rated critical and strong. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on critical and strong for treatment infrastructure improvements, Water 23? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. Let's take Water 27 and Water 29. 27 is the advanced metering infrastructure, and 29 is the Columbia Heights campus upgrade. Those were both rated significant strong last year. Do I have a motion?
Moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Significant and strong for 27 and 29.
Hey, John, we're very over time right now.
Okay.
And I think we really need to wrap it up because I got to take off here very shortly.
Yeah, well, we're almost done. So I'm going to take that as unanimous consent for 27.
Nope. John, I would argue that the electrical system improvements are critical. I think a failure there in an aging system would have potentially catastrophic effects. So I would move for critical there.
So you're talking about 29?
No, 31.
Okay, we're not on 31 yet, so let's...
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we've got unanimous consent on 27 and 29.
Second, Steve Brandt's motion.
All right, so the motion is critical and strong for Water 31, electrical service rehab. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. And now we're to the final project, I believe. Let me just double check. Yep, the final project is Water 32. That's softening plant chemical system improvements, rated significant and strong, significant and moderate last year. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And Kai seconded. Any discussion on significant and moderate for Water 32? Hearing none, I'll take that as unanimous consent. So now we just need to do a roll call vote on all the unanimous motions.
Is there 35, John? Did we do that? I have Water 35 on my list. Renewable Energy.
Why is that not on my list? Is that on a different tab?
That was on my whole big list of.
That's not on my printout. I'm wondering why it's not on my printout. Just a minute here.
Okay.
Is that under the Utilities and Fleet tab?
Yeah.
It's under the Art and Public Grounds tab, it looks like.
I wonder why it's there. Missed it. Let me get there.
At the end of it, the last column, column R.
Looks like Human Development is rating that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. That's why I don't have it.
Sorry. I see.
All right, so I think that the only thing that leaves us to do is do the roll call on all the unanimous consent motions that we've passed.
Move adoption as agreed upon.
Is there a second?
Second.
Neil, can you take the vote on that?
John Bernstein,
Aye.
Steve Brandt,
Aye.
Tanya DeGarmo,
Aye.
Engel, Amity Foster,
Aye.
Risa Hustad, Katie Jones, Matt Kazinka,
Aye.
Erica Mauter,
Aye.
Dan Miller,
Aye.
George Montague,
Aye.
Freeman,
Aye.
Jeff Strand.
Aye.
There's 11 ayes.
All right, that passes. I think that concludes our business for today. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you, everybody. The bad news is we went way over time. The good news is it's going to be a lot easier next week or on Friday.
Thanks, Neil.
Thank you all.
Thanks.